Josh Brown, not soon after we'd left the office did the industry collapse yet again. You can't go a few minutes in this gaffe without something falling apart. And Microsoft are shutting down Redfall and Prey developer Arcane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks, Mighty Doom developer Alpha Dog Games and Roundhouse Games, but apparently Roundhouse Games are going to be merging with ZeniMax. There's a whole lot of stuff here, various responses from the industry as to just how well the games that these teams produced had gone down, only resulting in the teams being laid off anyway. Initial reactions before I get to how stupid a lot of the corporate side of this is.
Couldn't believe it, man. I was under no illusion that the layoffs were going to be over this year. I mean, just last week we had the closures of the Take-Two's, those two studios.
Roll 7.
But I hoped that after the layoffs at Activision Blizzard earlier in the year with Microsoft and the announcement of their kind of summer showcase for June, I thought we'd gotten over that with this company. So to see this a week after that showcase was announced, I actually can't believe it. The developers in question, Arcane Austin, you might point to Redfall underperforming and not being what it should, but that's the studio that made Prey, and it's like to shut them down immediately after that to me is crazy. But Tango Gameworks for me is the one that I just can't get my head around. You drop Hi-Fi Rush last year, it feels like that should have been the start of something, a new way of doing business. Like that was shadow dropped, it got this huge acclaim, apparently sales were pretty good, and it seemed like they were cooking up Evil Within 3, so the fact that we're never going to get that, I'm going to get into it more in a little bit, but every cynical take that I had about this Microsoft acquisition, it is guttering to see it come true, where I was so trying to be optimistic about it, man, and it's like every move they made is bad.
There's so much of this that feels couched in the fact that they need to make up $70 billion. Like, how much of this was just, let's acquire Call of Duty and then make the rest of it make sense over time. And I just tweeted as soon as this happened. Like I said, I'm going to get to some of the corporate stuff, because there's a response from another co-developer over at Arcane as well, because Arcane are made up of different studios. You've got Arcane Leon, Arcane Austin, who brought you the Dishonored games and stuff like that. But like the corporate side of it, like the sell for Game Pass is meant to be dream project funding, getting you over the finish line, a big variety of titles, and an in-baked audience that's ready to receive them every month. And if you can't stand by something like Hi-Fi Rush, which maybe could have sold Call of Duty numbers, and maybe that's what it'll always come down to, but Hi-Fi Rush felt like this big turning point last year of like, oh, this is the Xbox plan. It allows something like this to be in front of 30 million people or whatever the hell it is, all at once kind of thing. And if you can't do right by that, like, it's ludicrous. You've also got Xbox's Matt Booty, who's the person who apparently communicated this internally across some emails, talking about they're doing all this to reprioritize certain projects and franchises going forward and to focus on new IP. And it's like Hi-Fi Rush was new IP. Arcane specialize in new IP. It's just a stupid thing. And at some point it will just be ones and zeros. And I've got a quote from Phil Spencer in here as well, because Microsoft Xbox, as we can refer to them, only did just lay off people in January as well. 1,900 people let go across January. So there's a quote from that. But in this regard, like I said, you've got Matt Booty out there trying to do the information on the inside. But him saying in regards to Arcane Austin, back when Redfall came out last year, and it was a bit of a disappointment, saying there was no plans to shut the studio last year. He also said, we had Xbox's Aaron Greenberg saying they couldn't be happier with the team in regards to Hi-Fi Rush. So is that hollow? Does that make,
dude?
There's no through line.
Yeah, honestly, man, like I'm bummed out. I'm full of anger, and I've got nothing but cynicism on this news, and I'm very sorry about that. But this is like the latest in a long string of just terrible news about the industry this year. And quotes like that just make me realize, and all of these layoffs and closures this year from Microsoft especially has made me realize, like, none of these companies are your friend, right? I always feel bad in and of myself, feel worse for the people who've been laid off, but I've been on these podcasts, I've been doing news videos about this company for years, trying to be optimistic about takeovers like this, and hoping that people who present outwardly friendly sort of, personalities like Phil Spencer, you want to believe in the guy, right? You want to believe that he has the developers' best interests at heart, the fans' best interests at heart, the gaming industry's best interests at heart. And it's just, to me, a reminder that no matter how charismatic someone might be, no matter what people literally tell you directly about things being successful, about their plans, ultimately, like, it's going to mean nothing because a day later they can decide to completely change tact and they will try to spin it as a good thing and actually a mercy thing or whatever it is and relieve themselves of the responsibility. I cannot fathom buying all of these studios up only to treat them like this. I mean, when was Bethesda bought, man? Like, that was like 2019?
Well, it took forever for it to go through anyway, but it's like, it was such an S show for so long trying to get that thing over the finish line. And then, like I said, you had all the layoffs in January, you've got more specific layoffs now. Like you mentioned, it's not related to Xbox Bethesda stuff, but just last week, Roll 7 was shut down, even though Ollie Ollie World is a phenomenal game. Roller Drum won a BAFTA, and you still had the Kerbal Space Program dev shut down as well. Like, we are seeing this every month, if not every few weeks. There are major amounts of layoffs, and we'll get back around to that. I want to get back around to Phil Spencer as well. I do want to throw in though Arcane Leon's co-creative director, Dinga Bakaba. It might be Arcane Austin, but either way, it's a high-ranking dude over at Arcane called Dinga Bakaba, who was just on Twitter just laying into the reality of what's happening, saying this is absolutely terrible. To any executive reading this, friendly reminder that video games are an entertainment/cultural industry, and your business as a corporation is to take care of your artists/entertainers and help them create value for you. Don't throw us into gold fever gambits. Don't use us as straw men for miscalculations/blind spots. Don't make our work environments Darwinist jungles. You say we make you proud when we make a good game. Make us proud when times are tough. We know you can. We've seen it before. He says, for now, great teams are sunsetting before our eyes again, and it's an effing gut stab. So those tweets might be deleted, but dude is very much laying in. He says the Leon studio is what's safe. Maybe I've got that the wrong way around. One of the studios is the one that's being shut down.
Leon is safe. Arcane Austin got shut down,
Yes. So, but still, like, you have the one of the co-creators, one of the co-heads of that studio just laying the hell in, because at some point, how the hell are you supposed to hang back? But like I said, you had all those layoffs back in January, and then you had Phil Spencer was being grilled about that in March, and he just said that all of it comes down to growth across the industry. He said, we're a business. I've said over and over, I don't get the luxury of not having to run a profitable, growing business inside of Microsoft, and we are that today, as in back in March, but I reflect on friends of mine in the industry that have been displaced and lost their jobs, and how I don't want this industry to be a place where people can't with confidence build a career. So that's why I keep pivoting back to how does the industry get back to growth? Why does somebody own a share in someone's stock if it's not going to grow? The side of the business that then gets scrutinized is the cost side, because if you're not going to grow the revenue side, then the cost side becomes challenged. I'll throw in as well Eurogamer saying that more than 15,000 people have been thought to let go across the last 18 months. So we're hitting, it can't get, well, I was going to say can't get any worse. It's the worst it's been so far. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, that quote, man, riles me up again because on the one hand, he's talking about creating a sustainable, environment for developers that can have careers, that can feel like their jobs are stable and not at risk. But at the same time, that to me is not aligned with growth, because growth does not stop, growth does not care, growth does not give a crap about the game's quality. If they sold well, they're just, all they care about, all the shareholders care about, all those executives at the top level care about is making that number go higher. And if that number doesn't go higher, how can we make it go higher? We'll shut down the studio, reduce the costs, we'll cancel this game. And I'm like, if you're doing this to this degree now, where's the growth gonna come from them in the games that you currently have? You talk about new IP, but at the same time, you're shutting down studios that are known for new IP, and you're focusing on Call of Duty or whatever it may be. I think that quote from the Arcane developer is just absolutely spot on, because that to me, I can't fathom these studios not getting behind the developers when times are tough. Yep. And it's, obviously Arcane and Bethesda were involved in making something like Redfall, which was a disaster, chasing live service trends when that studio wasn't made up to do that. But at the same time, that's one dud. They made Prey. They're part of a bigger Arcane studio. They're part of Bethesda. And if that didn't work, why is it on them and not the people at the very, very top who are sort of, getting those consequences? And that makes me frustrated that you can have one miss, and not even a miss in some cases. You can have one thing that doesn't do, $1 billion. In this current climate, that's enough to get you shut down. You could be Tango Gameworks and you could be putting out these pretty good titles, but not complete blockbusters, and you can get shut down. And I think it's even more egregious in their case because they've not even really had a AAA Microsoft game since they got bought out.
No,
they published Ghostwire Tokyo, Up, which was initially a PlayStation 5 exclusive. They did Hi-Fi Rush, which was shadow dropped. They've not even had a chance to prove themselves under this new regime. You know what I mean? Like, for all we know, The Evil Within 3 might be the best game ever. It might have like turned their fortunes around as a studio, but Microsoft just doesn't seem willing to give these developers a chance. And I think that is shocking, because you buy companies like this and you give them faith. You give them faith that you're going to back them. You give them faith that they're now part of a quote-unquote family. You give them faith that they have access to the resources that you have. And if you're sort of collateral damage because they want Skyrim, they want the Elder Scrolls, they want Doom, it's like, no, but you bought us all. You know what I mean? And you have a duty to all of us.
Well, the thing is, if you look at, if people want to see what it's like for a studio being acquired by Microsoft, Xbox, and what the Game Pass, what those conversations are like, if you watch Double Fine's Psych Odyssey when they were making Psychonauts 2, and that game was struggling to get over the finish line, and then they got acquired by Microsoft, and there's all the conversations about putting Psychonauts on Game Pass, and Matt Booty is in that documentary having conversations with Tim Schafer. Double Fine will be the one that will really get to me, where it's like you bought this legacy studio with this great creative mind and set of minds in there, only to not maximize it. But it's like, when you look at the way that those conversations go, it's very, hey, don't worry, just chill out. We've got this constant monthly revenue stream. It's all going to be okay. We can fund this thing, this dream project, whatever it is, and we can make it all work. And obviously Psychonauts 2 is a phenomenal video game. It did work for them, but I wonder whether that whole approach was just a bit too short-sighted. And there's also just the fact that once, I think you said this, like once Microsoft started noticing that's a $70 billion acquisition to get Call of Duty, then you have bigger wigs weighing in saying, well, we need to make bigger cleaving cuts to make this all make sense. Because you can't just buy these massive studios or keep buying these studios to fund smaller projects. The returns need to be bigger. And I don't know, I just, the Matt Booty set of emails that he put out internally, at the very end of that, he mentions like, well, we still have Starfield Shattered Space coming out. We still have an Elder Scrolls Online expansion, Fallout 76. And it's like, that to me is extremely short-sighted. Like the amount of buzz that was around Hi-Fi Rush when it came out, if you put a lot of money behind the marketing of that game, I think you could have made it the next big tentpole Xbox franchise. Like a lot of people knew about it, they were excited when it was coming to PlayStation. You look at the PlayStation Store's top 10, and it includes Sea of Thieves, Hi-Fi Rush, the titles that are going across from Xbox. Like the quality of is there in the games. It's just they don't seem to back it. Like it's just, for me, that I've always said that Xbox has a marketing issue. They don't get behind things the way they used to get behind a Halo, a Gears of War, a Fable, whatever. And I just have to imagine that if you were better with the marketing side of it, if you nailed knowing which projects were in the works, as opposed to waiting until they're on store shelves and then saying, in Redfall's case, oh, we should have been better with it. If you had a whole bunch of Hi-Fi Rushes that had really cool gameplay mechanics, really cool art aesthetics, they were being marketed really well, and then you say, hey, all of this is available on Game Pass, that seems like it would make a hell of a lot more sense than this weird hands-off, everybody's independent but will shut you down from afar approach that they've had for the last few years. It is asinine, and I think a lot of it just comes back to the fact that the industry is too bloated. It costs too much to make these games, and I've long said about a reduction in scope for games anyway, but Hi-Fi Rush would be the perfect example of of a manageable video game budget, but for whatever reason that still wasn't good enough.
No, 100%. I think the more that they target like those studios, not even mid-tier studios in the case of Arcane Austin and Tango, but studios that aren't known for making billion-dollar blockbusters, like I said, like those are the ones getting the chop. So to me, it indicates that they're not trying to scale in those budgets. They're almost trying to chase even higher budgets on bigger franchises or safe bets in the hopes of getting that bottom line up. But I just don't think that works. I think the evidence suggests that it does not work. And look, I don't know anything about Matt Booty as a person, but that, a statement that was put out, in one breath talking about focusing on new IP, and in the other saying, oh, don't worry guys, we've got DLC for Fallout 76 coming out, we've got Shattered Space, we've got the Elder Scrolls Online, don't worry, we still got all that to look forward to. It's like, what? You can't, what? You can't even, your safe bets aren't safe bets anymore. You put out something like Halo Infinite and it's a trash fire. You know what I mean? Like you spend millions of dollars presumably on a reboot of Perfect Dark, calling it a quadruple A game, and we don't see it for 6 years. What the hell is going on with Fable? Like, it's just a case of, I think, just echoing what you said there, of they've made this $70 billion acquisition, and to them it's kind of throwing their previous toys out the pram. It was huge when they bought Bethesda, but now that deal pales in comparison to the $70 billion they've just spent, so they're going to get the chop. We need to streamline this business because we bought all of these studios and we have no idea what to produce with them, and that is like the worst case scenario for any acquisition ever in the gaming space. We saw it with EA shutting down studios way back when, and now we're seeing it with Microsoft when they should have been the ones who were not saving those studios. But I mean, how optimistic were we when Obsidian was bought and we thought, finally, they now have the resources and time to make great games. Now I'm worried about Obsidian. Now we're worried about Double Fine, because how do they fit in with this new model? Like, I just don't see the Xbox who bought those studios and being compatible with the Xbox that own all of the studios that they have today.
Well, the thing is, like, with the growth side of it, buying something like Call of Duty, making Game Pass into the Call of Duty Pass, or whatever the hell you want to call it, like, that changes so many expectations for how big Game Pass needs to be, quote unquote needs to be internally, to make it viable. If that changes shareholder expectations, or that just changes internal conversations in terms of how Microsoft view Xbox within Microsoft, like, it's not like Microsoft need Xbox. Speaking of things on YouTube that you can just go watch, there's the whole last 20 years of Xbox documentary on Xbox's channel about how when they messed up the Xbox One, it was an uphill battle to even justify the existence of Xbox to keep going and keep going forward. But that, I mean, when you look at like Phil Spencer, like the back and forth way that he's handled running everything, like back and forth on exclusivity, saying things will be available wherever Game Pass exists. I always kind of thought that at least he was doing right by the smaller creators. At least he was doing right by making sure that something like Immortality or whatever, like various like games that have their heart in the right place are available on Game Pass to as many people as possible. And maybe that was his Hail Mary, and we've seen the peak of it, and now we're on the other side of it, and that'll be what he'll be remembered for, is getting various projects out there on Game Pass that would never even have been greenlit before. And maybe that's as much as he can do in the legacy of Xbox. But that whole approach for what Game Pass is never really felt like it got capitalized on, to me, because of marketing, and because they're not really conveying, making you excited about what's coming each month. But I just wonder, like, now it's gotten so big and so bloated and so ridiculous, and a lot of the revenue, the bottom line, never really got there in terms of Game Pass subscriptions never became more than, I think it was 30% of their overall bottom line, if that. It just doesn't feel like it's going to work. It doesn't feel like these gambits, it doesn't feel like this will work.
You know what, again, going back to my optimistic view of all of these acquisitions over the past 10 years, the idea was always the hope that Microsoft had some kind of plan, that Phil Spencer had some kind of long-term plan for what he was going to do with all of these studios. And I think the further we get into these acquisitions and whatnot, it's clear that there was no plan. There was a big splash of cash in the hopes that it would somehow make them money. Even, again, going back to I'm not personally going after it, but that booty statement, talking about that the future is in new IP. You just don't buy studios like this to have them work on new IP. That's not why you buy studios, man. You buy Bethesda because you want Elder Scrolls, because you want Starfield, you want Doom, you want Wolfenstein. You buy Activision because you want Call of Duty. Don't barefaced lie and say, like, you want to buy a studio like Activision to put the Call of Duty devs on a new IP. That's not going to happen in a million years. You know what I mean?
True.
It's just...
I think they want both.
All the way,
but yeah.
Of course. I'm probably singling too much on that, but it goes back to that idea that the messaging for me is just all over the place, and it makes me wonder, like, what do you want? What are we focusing on? Are we focusing on Game Pass? Are we focusing on selling consoles? Are we focusing on subscription services? Are we focusing on multi-platform stuff? Are we focusing on exclusives? You pointed it out so many times with, the back and forward on, we want Xbox to be an ecosystem for everyone versus we want to sell exclusives, and it's like that flip-floppy nature. I just see that across the board now, and it's like I have no trust in it anymore. I used to give them the benefit of the doubt, and now I'm like, you don't even know what Xbox is.
No,